a lot. I mean, a lot of people assuming that this is men being violent towards women. What are the numbers? For some reason, I think it's like 87-13 or something like that percentage-wise. But what are the numbers going back the other way, where women are the domestic violence perpetrator is a woman?
We haven't had enough studies or research done to understand that. We do know that here in Australia and also in New Zealand that a lot of the women that are in prison that have committed serious offences, they may have, for example, used an offensive weapon like a knife against someone, or they may have, in fact, committed a homicide. We know the numbers there, but what we don't really know, Tim, is the numbers around the other types of violence. So the emotional and psychological violence that's being perpetrated against men, and it's because people are not reporting it. So what we do know is that there's different levels of harm based on gender. So we know that the physicality harm against a woman is much greater than against a male. However, there's still a lot of domestic violence that happens that's perpetrated against a male, and also our LGBTIQ communities as well. So same-sex marriage, partnerships, and so forth. And so, I mean, I know in Australia here we've got about 10% of our population is affiliated with those communities. So we've got a long way to go in terms of understanding the true picture. So to give you some context, in New Zealand, I know that only about 26% of what occurred was actually being reported to the police, just to give some context.
Is that across the board, or is that that's across the board? So that's any version of domestic violence at all? 26%. That means 74% unreported.
And I believe even those figures are light, because most of those figures, and this is only my assumption, but most of the figures I believe will have come from reporting of incidents and episodes where the female was the victim. So I still think we've got a long way to go in terms of understanding what the true harm is to all members of our community. And it's not just males, it's grandparents, it's aunties, it's uncles, it's cousins, it's the whole dynamic going on there, because most people don't want to disclose what's going on in households.
They don't want to be the cause of families breaking up. They don't want to be the cause of that, but safety is still being compromised as a result. I mean, some people might go, well, hang on a minute, because of the male's physicality, why would he be getting abused in any way by if it's a male-female relationship by his female partner? And so that abuse can come in different forms that you're alluding to, which may not be physical, but it can be verbal assaults, it can be financial withdrawal, it can be isolation, depending on who is the breadwinner in that particular family, or who has that sort of dominant wealth profile, possibly. If somebody feels powerless to get out, and that power then can be used by any sort of perpetrator, from a physical versus emotional versus self-esteem versus verbal versus whatever it is, threaten, take kids.
Absolutely. Children are used as leverage in relationships to, and I see it all the time, and I see it even with COVID, and in particular, like, children are used to prevent people from going to work. Because they may come back and infect others, and so forth, and even around parenting arrangements, and where you've got visitation with children going backwards and forwards, and how that all looks now with COVID. So it might be that, for example, that children go and visit one parent and then they're not returned, and so forth. So there's a lot of different tactics that we're seeing now that are being used, and I think that the difference, Tim, is in terms of The types of I guess harm between the two genders is around so when we have violence being perpetrated that is extreme. So you've got sexual violence, for example, and you've got a lot of strangulation is another one. So we're seeing now a lot of cases that are coming forward where the prevalence of strangulation is huge, and we don't see that a lot where women are perpetrating that against men. It's mainly the other way around. So the four risk factors that my good friend Betty Taylor, who's the CEO of and director of the Red Rose Foundation here in Australia, she talks about the four S's, and I think she's I totally agree with her. And so when we've got separation, so we're talking about when someone has either left a relationship, they're talking about it, or there's been an attempted separation. Those are really high risk times for anyone in a relationship. Stalking is another one, so being monitored all the time, and we've got strangulation as well, which is a really big one. And when someone has been strangled, they are 750% more likely to be at risk of death. So it's a really, really big one. Another one's pregnancy too. So it's really, when someone's pregnant, we see huge increases in risk at harm. We see higher types of violence. So there's all sorts of different types of risk factors that come into play, regardless of gender, and it doesn't discriminate. It does not discriminate. Domestic violence doesn't discriminate depending on who you are, how much you earn, what social background you come from, what social setting you're in.
Yeah, it doesn't discriminate. Okay, so in your experience, why is it happening? Why does domestic violence happen? What is if we had this sort of magic fix thing, where's it coming from? What needs to happen to solve it?
It's a great question, and it's one that's been spoken about for years. And what we do know is that a lot of domestic violence is intergenerational. So there's a lot of intergenerational harm, and so as children, we learn particular behaviours, and we're brought up with certain beliefs, and our learned behaviours is especially in terms of really our environment around us as well. And so often we learn things from others, and I think that this is where it's really come from. And so our children are key. Our children are absolutely key with their upbringings to really prevent domestic violence into the next generation and our futures. So if we can begin to really demonstrate by showing, and that's going to stop the intergenerational harm.
So role modeling, being a positive role model. So if that person has seen domestic violence in their parents, is to not perpetrate it or being a part of it, and model this to the kids so the kids know how to resolve situations and arguments and disagreements.
Absolutely, and I'll give you an example, and this is what I see all the time, is that when we have been able to really successfully have families still interact separately in different houses and get them away from the arguing, what I seem to find is that the children then start talking to mum, for example, in the same way. Children begin to replicate what mum and dad do and say in the household. So we're finding that, for example, I had a young boy just recently, last week, and he started talking to his mum just like his dad would. So he started using the same adult language and there was this expectation around, well, why should I get off my bed? Because it's your role to do this, or you should be doing that, or you're just silly because you've done this. And these are the words that were common in the household when the family was together. So it's very much learned behaviour around responses and also beliefs as well. It's very difficult to unlearn beliefs because you almost have to have a manual correction in terms of these are my core beliefs, and it's your default pattern, isn't it? And we all do that. We're all very habitual people. I know for a fact that I do that every day, and so we all experience it with COVID-19, where our routines are what they are, and now that we're in isolation at home, suddenly it's foreign, it's tough, it's challenging for us to not go out to work, or not to go and get that coffee, or not to socialise with people. And so it creates this fear, this anxiety, and a bit of a disconnect, really, doesn't it? And so it's the same thing. So it's very difficult to unlearn behaviours when they're our default patterns.
Yeah, but it's definitely possible for anyone watching this who wants to change their behavior. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Who wants to change their behavior? It's definitely possible. It just takes resources, resourcefulness, a network of support, somebody that you can trust to talk to that's not going to judge you, but that is going to keep your best interests at heart, as well as those around you in the environment around you. For me, for example, I think since I was 16, alcohol was something that was just normal. And for a lot of people, it is. And so I decided on the 1st of January this year that I'm not going to have it anymore. And I got to say, I mean, all growing up, it was just something that mum and dad and everybody, the whole society does. It's not a judgment against society per se, but it was just something that I just noticed. When I could say I could take it or leave it, I had never left it. I would only take it. So then I was just like, okay, maybe this is getting like to the point where, because when I think I don't want this thing to control me. But it was, now that one's got chemical addiction components to it, whereas belief systems have, I guess, emotional or psychological, not addictions, but mindsets, foundational mindsets, that this is the way the world works. Filters, this is the way that I process information and I think things. And this is truth, I guess. And when people talk about what's your truth, what's my truth? Well, fundamentally, there has to be some sort of absolute truth if the concept of truth is meaningful at all. So having variable degrees of truth doesn't make much sense. But if we can break that down to, well, what really is going on, what really is right, and then addressing people's values in a particular way to go, well, what do you really value here? Is this more important than this? Because you're behaving as if this is more important. I was behaving as if alcohol was more important. Yes, there's a chemical addiction component, but I noticed there was definitely a psychological, I'd given it permission to be my crutch in a way that it wasn't healthy for me, and it wasn't valuable after a certain amount of drinking. It wouldn't have been valuable to anybody else apart from having a laugh. It wouldn't have been terribly valuable for others. And having a young child at home, it was just like, you know what, enough. So I thought, there's no way I can do this. This is what I thought, but it was a lot easier than I thought, even though, I mean, I read stuff and I'm in the communities where I'm helping people in that community think about things, but I read stuff and I just go, wow, some people have got really horrific things that have happened in their life where this has been their out, their escape, their way. And in domestic violence, they're under so much lack of control that this is the only thing that they think that they can control. And if they can't control it, they can control it with this or however else they're perpetuating. And then at least they have this sort of sense of control in their lives. So for me, from the alcohol side, it was simply it came down to a decision, which, by the way, I put off for a little while. And then it came down to, and I did this with smoking many years ago. So I smoked for a while. I met a girl, she smoked, so I thought I'd better smoke too. So I did. I'm not blaming her. I made the decision myself. But when I decide to do something, I tend to go in hard. And so I smoked like a chimney. But after a while, I needed to be I needed to be innovative with the way that I stopped myself, because I noticed one of the places I smoked a lot was in the car. So I put all these stickers all over my car saying, I'm a coach, I can help you, I can help you shift and live the better life. And I couldn't very well be smoking in the car with all of that on my car.
Yes.
It was this disconnect. It was
Yes.
a visual cognitive dissonance, I guess. It made me be a hypocrite. So the only way that I could stop being a hypocrite was by almost declaring what my belief is, if and that is, I'm a non-smoker who just happened to be smoking, and it came down to identity. So anybody who's in this sort of situation, you aren't. My thing would be, you're not that evil person, but you are doing things that are evil. I mean, that would be one. So in other words, your identity is you're good, you're just doing bad stuff. So what we need to do is we need support to get rid of the bad stuff so you can go back to being the good version of you. And if you discover that you're not a good person, then you can just go and live somewhere with other people who aren't terribly good. But
most people over the 23 years in the place that I met, they were good people. They did bad things for many reasons, but they don't set out to do them most of the time. What I would say is I totally agree with you. I agree that most people are just they have brilliant qualities about them. They really do, and they just need the help to stop behaviour. One of the things that I saw across the 23 years was so many people. In fact, I can only think of one, Tim, that I really knew that I couldn't actually put my finger on where there was good in someone. So just to give you some context, there's so many people that haven't had the opportunity to understand that it's there, and we need to talk to people, because a lot of people haven't had an opportunity to even sit down and talk with another person. And so when we can give them the skills to actually understand, where the behaviours come from, and understanding that, it's huge.